I'm Ivo. I'm from Brazil. I graduated in 2019 from the University of Chicago, where I studied math and econ. And I graduated in 2023 from Stanford University with an MBA and a master's in education. I can't remember how I first heard about the 2+2 program, but the moment I saw it, I knew it was for me. I thought I had a good story to tell. I was a competitive candidate. The experience of doing an MBA in a top university in the US sounded amazing to me. 2 years of focusing on developing myself, my leadership skills, and my business acumen sounded like the perfect complement to the very theoretical education that I had received in college at the University of Chicago. I applied to 4 schools: Stanford, Chicago Booth, MIT, and Harvard. Those are the most competitive programs that offered a 2+2 equivalent program back at the time, and they were the ones that I was the most excited to attend for a variety of reasons, including the fact that, honestly, those are some of the best business schools in the world. The main challenge I faced in applying to MBAs was really the fact that I was applying as a 2+2 candidate, which is a program that just has less information available about it online. So I couldn't find as clear strategies or as many profiles or as many cases, and I really wish I had someone help me strategize how to present my story to make the process way less stressful. For me, figuring out that on my own was pretty hard, but still it worked out, so I'm glad I stayed with it and tried my best. I learned a lot about myself in the application process, and I would say it would have been worth it even if I hadn't gotten in. Especially the Stanford application process had this question that is, what matters the most to you and why? I think it's a really powerful question, and it forces you to take a step back and think, why am I even doing this? Why am I doing what I'm doing now? Why do I want to do an MBA? Why is any of this relevant? What am I trying to get out of this one life on earth? And what I learned about myself is that there's more to just me that I want to do. I want to help other people around me in very specific ways. I think that education and creating opportunities for more people of all kinds of backgrounds and improving the way education is delivered to everyone from the very poor to the very rich is something I'm really passionate about, and that became really clear to me when I was writing my essays and thinking about what matters to me the most and why does it matter to me. And at that point in time, what mattered the most to me was really improving myself so that I could then achieve this big dream in education and in creating opportunity for others. So an MBA was really the way to achieve what mattered the most to me and why. So when I finished it, I realized that question led me to think at the same time that my answer was both what matters the most to me and why an MBA. And the two of them came together. And I think that's part of why that essay was powerful and successful. From my class at the University of Chicago, I believe I was the only one who got in as a 2+2 student to Stanford. I know there was another student who got in Harvard and a couple other more who got into Chicago Booth, as you'd expect, as it's the University of Chicago. So yeah, I believe I was the only one. Part of the reason why I got in is I think I had a very compelling story of why an MBA was the right thing for me and why those 2 years of gap were really important. First, I was not a business student, which means that the entire MBA education is something that would be very different from me. I had taken 2 or 3 classes at Chicago Booth, so I could confirm that I enjoyed the business school environment, but I didn't have plenty of experience with it. I was actually studying math, so I was coming from a different background, and I think that actually helps when you're applying to 2+2 programs to show it the ways in which your background is not exactly the same that you will get when you are doing your MBA. Otherwise, why are you doing that right now? So I was studying math, and I was also a head of this NGO that was very big, and it operated in over 10 time zones. It was in Asia, Europe, North America, South America, the Middle East. And that experience was at the same time very rewarding for me, but it also helped me realize a lot of the things that I lacked in, a lot of my weaknesses. And those are the things that I talked about in my essays. I talked about weaknesses that I had realized about myself and ways that I thought an MBA would help me address those weaknesses and become a better person for me, for those around me, and for my companies and for the world. So I talked a lot about my dreams and a lot about how an MBA would help me get there by addressing specific issues that I realized I had and errors that I had made. And I think that story is a bit unique. Few people in college have that experience that I had and have such clarity on what they're lacking and what they need to get from an MBA experience so that it's worth it for them. I think that was the key. I think what's important is to show that you are not going to an MBA to do the very same thing that you just spent the last 4 years doing. So if you spent the last 4 years studying business and your classes in college were corporate finance and financial accounting and things like that, you will have a harder time explaining why do you need to apply to an MBA right now? Don't you know everything already? If it's for the networking, isn't MBA the best way to do that networking? Couldn't you do it while you're working? Maybe you're already a pro networker given your education. So I would definitely say if you're still choosing your majors, try to shy away from business, maybe even from economics, possibly, depending on what the focus is. If it's very academic, like research oriented, I actually think that's fine. But if you're doing something different, like history or mathematics or theoretical physics, or if you're in law school or if you are going to medical school, that is such a great pitch because you're bringing in some diversity that those business schools know that it would be hard to get otherwise. So getting a 2+2 student is a way for them to secure that diversity in background and in ways of thinking that is so valuable to everyone in an MBA program. So yeah, I would choose one of those. And if you are doing business or economics and you don't want to be one of those cliche applicants, I would make sure to highlight either ways that you have more self-awareness than the regular person. So what is it that you're lacking that you want to get from an MBA? Or ways that your experience is actually pretty unorthodox and maybe it's completely different from what business or economics majors do. Maybe you spent some of your time abroad and that changed your experience, or maybe you have a completely different focus to what you're doing. Maybe you're a business student, but really what you do is your own side startup, or try to tell a story that's different than I took financial accounting in college and now I want to do an MBA to take more financial accounting. So my advice for 2+2 students in terms of pursuing work experience is don't be afraid of taking risks. Start your own startup, go work for a small startup. I think it's honestly a bit of a waste if you spend that entire time in a career in between your college and your MBA in a career that is too safe. You don't need to make money now in most cases. If you do, that's fine, go for it. But money should not be your main consideration right now. Safety should not be your main consideration right now. You've been accepted to a top MBA program, so you should just make use of that time to take risks and do something bold. The work experience that I suggest for students who are going to apply to a 2+2 program is either something that is very unique and that ties very well to your story, or if you have a strong story otherwise, let's say you're ahead of an NGO, you are already ahead of your own program, you are doing these initiatives that are really cool, maybe it's politics, whatever it is, if you already have that unique story, then I would honestly say that getting some good brands on your resume is probably a really good idea. So if you're gonna work at Wall Street, make sure to go to Goldman Sachs, Morgan Stanley, JP Morgan, Bank of America. Don't go to some institution that no one has ever heard of. That won't add as much value in general, unless you have a really good position there for some reason. If you're going to consulting, try to land one of the big three. In general, they have a better reputation for a reason within recruiting circles, and they might increase your odds of getting in one of the top schools. So yeah, traditional roles, traditional paths are actually pretty okay. They will not hurt your application at all. So whether you're at McKinsey or Goldman or Bank of America or wherever that is, you are well positioned to get in one of those competitive MBA programs. But in general, I'd rather go the bold way. Try something crazy. I wish I had done more of that, to be honest. My plans changed because of COVID and I ended up staying in Wall Street. And if I could go back, the one thing I would change is I would have taken a 3+2. I would have deferred my enrollment a little bit more so I could try something really risky without any fears and being super excited about going to Stanford the following year. Yeah, I'd take the risk, go the risky route. Networking, in terms of getting in, I don't think it helps that much, honestly. If you know a couple of people, 3 or 4 in a program that you're applying to, you can get a lot of intel from them. They can tell you what it's like to be at that institution, what it's like to study and live there, and that's probably enough. I've seen some people go to campus like 1,000 times and try to meet everyone in that MBA program before they even apply, thinking that by name dropping a lot of people or by knowing a lot of people, they will increase their chances of getting in. They won't. What's going to increase your chances of getting in is getting a good score in your GMATs, getting good grades in college, having a solid resume, and amazing essays. That's what's going to get you in. Networking, very useful for many things. I don't think it's as useful for admissions. I think it's very important to very carefully choose whether you're going to take the GMAT or the GRE. So in my case, I studied math, so I knew that if I got a perfect score in the GRE math section, no one would question my math diploma. Now, getting a perfect score on the GMAT, that's almost impossible. I think no one in my Stanford class got a perfect score. So what I'll say is, if you think you can get high enough a score on the GMAT, if you have the time and the energy and the ability to get a really good high score on the GMAT, probably go for it. If you're not as sure and you think you might bomb it, the GRE is an objectively easier exam. And in my case, that's what I thought. I thought I already have a math diploma. They're not gonna question my abilities in that sense. So I'd rather take the easier exam, get an insanely high grade and not get questions about it. Before business school, I actually thought that Wall Street might be my career path, and I really wanted to try it out. I had a lot of friends that were in finance, and I wanted to see what that was like for myself. And it's also a very high-paying career, so I wanted to test it. I wanted to try it out, and I needed the money at the time. I won't complain about it. It was a great experience. And what I thought is, in 1 year, I should probably have it very clear if Wall Street is what I want to do for the rest of my life or for a long period of time or not. After 1 year, I knew it wasn't. I wanted to transfer out and go do something else entirely, work at a startup. I even recruited to some, but COVID hit, my plans changed. For personal reasons, it was better for me to stay in Wall Street doing what I was doing. I stayed there, and then I went straight from Bank of America to Stanford. If I could go back, I wouldn't change my decision to stay in Wall Street, but I would have extended my deferral period, which is something you can do in some universities. At Stanford, that's possible. I would have extended my deferral period and I would have worked at a startup. I think that coming to a place like Stanford with some startup experience is a no-brainer, and that's the one thing I would change. I actually didn't tell anyone that I got in Stanford. I was already working in Wall Street. There was a chance that I wouldn't come. I hadn't enrolled. I was just accepted to. So I thought that telling my bosses that I had gotten in might make them question my commitment. And that would be unfair because I really was trying Wall Street out. I wanted to make it work and I wouldn't want any questions to be put around my commitment or my level of seriousness there. So I didn't tell anyone about it until I officially committed to attending. And the day that I committed to attending, I told my boss and then everyone else on the team after that. So I wouldn't say that going to Stanford impacted my experience a lot in the workplace. It did open a couple of doors, a couple of emails and warm intros that were easier, but I stayed at the same job. I stayed doing what I was doing, living in the same city. And a lot of that is because of COVID. So I wonder how things would have been different. But yeah, I think you can capitalize a lot more than I did on having a Stanford email for 2 years and being able to tell everyone you're an incoming Stanford student. There were other 2+2 students at Stanford GSB, but I'll be honest, I don't know who they were. And what I mean by that is, once you start your MBA, it doesn't matter if you're a 2+2 or not. You're an MBA student, like everyone else. Everyone's treated the same, everyone's just as impressive, and yeah, it didn't make a difference. I don't know who were the 2+2 students in my class. Some people might know, just as a fun fact, that I was a 2+2. Most of them probably wouldn't even. We're all the same. The experience, the same. We may be a bit younger, that's it. So it's very important to define your priorities. If you're applying 2+2, make that your priority for the period that you're applying. Make sure that you're doing activities and focusing in a way that will maximize your chances of admissions. Right before applications were due my year, I had a trip to Brazil scheduled for, and I was really excited for that trip. I was actually going with my then girlfriend, and I realized I was not at the point that I needed to be to take my GRE, and I decided 1 week before the trip that I was not going to go to Brazil and do that trip that I had been planning for a long time. It's not a great sacrifice or something unheard of, but it's the kind of sacrifice that you need to make. You need to prioritize. So maybe that means missing out on a couple of events or a couple of fun things that you would have loved to do to then spend 2 years that are literally the best in your life. I would have taken 2 years of an MBA at Stanford over a couple of weeks in Brazil any day of my life. Although I do recommend Brazil as well. As a good Brazilian, yeah. I made that trip a couple of times afterwards, so not much regret there.